What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today's Down and Dirty. We're going to talk about one of my favorite machines. We're going to talk about the little 938K loader. This is our pipe machine right here. This is one of the most common loaders you're going to see on pipe crews. It's a really good size. It's got a lot of capacity without having a huge footprint. You can do some really delicate work with it. It's just a really overall great loader for doing pipe work. But specifically what we're going to talk about today are the pipe forks on this guy. We're talking about these guys right here in the front. Oh, there it is. We're going to talk about these pipe forks because pipe forks are unique and they work a little different than pallet forks. So let's start talking about pallet forks. Pallet forks are the ones that you see in landscape supply yards. They generally, on the top rail and the bottom rail of the carrier, will have little notches. And that way when you set your forks, whatever width you want, they lock in and they will not move. Even if you bump into stuff, even if you kind of set your forks down on the ground, those forks are locked in place. Versus if we look at our pallet forks here, you're going to notice, especially from the side, when we start to tip these, you're going to notice they actually fall away from the carrier unit. Well, what that allows us to do is we can, I'm trying to focus on my focus here. What we can do is we can actually start to slide these over. And guess what the best part is? If you do it the right way, you don't have to get out of the cab. That's the beauty of pipe forks. Now, why do we use pipe forks instead of pallet forks? Well, if you think about it, on a pipe job, you might be carrying a giant structure around 1 minute, and then the second minute you've got to run down the road and get 2 sticks of 12-inch pipe. Well, if I'm carrying a structure around, especially a pretty big bulky structure, I'm going to want to set my pallet forks nice and wide so that I've got this very nice stable base for carrying that structure around. But when we're going into a couple sticks of 12-inch pipe, like storm pipe, well, those suckers sit a lot closer together. And so I'm going to want to have my forks in some sort of configuration like this. Well, you can imagine doing that 100 times a day, 50 times a day. I don't know how many times a day I would adjust the width on my forks, but getting in and out of the cab to do that manually is extremely frustrating. So what we do with pipe forks is we strategically go up and rub on stuff. And so what you're going to do is we're going to just pretend that my finger here is something that we're going to rub on, and I'm going to try to keep this thing focused at the right angle here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over and we're going to tip up just a little bit. Just a little. And all we're doing by tipping forward is we're taking pressure off of this rail at the bottom here because the forks naturally tend to lean forward, right? And so we're not wanting to hang them. We don't want them hanging. We just want to alleviate just a little bit of pressure off of this bottom rail here. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to set down and pretend that my finger is a rock or a pipe or whatever you're going to rub on. You're going to set it down there. Focus camera. There we go. And then we're actually going to crank the wheel over on our loader. And what that's going to do, if you've got these greased right, and we'll talk about that here in a second, if you've got these greased right, is it's going to allow that fork to slide over just with the movement of you turning your loader. And so you'll turn to the left here. That's going to slide your fork over to the right. And then you're going to lift up. You're going to come back over here. You're going to set down now for this fork here. Focus, there it is. We're going to set down for this fork here, and now we're going to turn this way, and that's going to cause this fork here to rub out that way. And right there, we were able to widen our forks without getting out of the cab. Now, there's one key concept here. Let's go two key concepts. The first key concept is you do need to tilt those forks just a hair away from you, especially if there's too much friction. And all we're doing is we're getting that fork to come away from, so here's your bottom rail and here's your fork. If we pitch forward, that fork is going to want to pull away from that bottom rail just a tiny bit. We don't want a ton, and that's going to alleviate some friction. The second concept we're going to talk about is greasing. So when it comes to greasing pipe forks, everyone's natural tendency in the beginning is grease the snot out of that top rail, and that way those forks are going to slide around so easy. It's true, that does work, but the problem is now when we're driving our loader and it's bouncing all over the job site, guess what your pipe forks are doing? Back and forth along that top rail. It drives you nuts because now you have no way to control where those pipe forks actually sit. If we're driving into a couple sticks of pipe and I hit a pothole or a little bit of a dip or I'm in a ditch, well, guess what? Your pipe forks slide all the way across that top rail. You have no control. So what you need to do is when you go grease these forks, let's focus here. We're going to focus on this top rail right here. And let me rotate this so you guys can see a little better what I'm talking about here. We're going to grease this rail going right along here, and you're only going to grease that about once every week and a half, and you're going to use a tiny dollop of grease. I'm literally talking this big of a dollop of grease. And then you're going to let those pipe forks slide back and forth. That's going to give you the right amount of friction to where you still can move the forks by rubbing on things, but it's not going to be too much lubrication to where your pipe forks are shooting all over. If you get a little too much grease, you can throw just a little bit of dirt up on that top rail and mix it in with that grease just a little bit, or take some rags, wipe some of that grease off. You just want to create just a little bit more friction so that those pipe forks aren't shooting all over on you. So that is a very quick overview of how you use pipe forks without getting out of the cab. Once you learn this skill, it takes a day or so of just fooling around and rubbing on things to kind of get a feel for how it works. Once you get it down though, it's really not that big of a deal. It becomes second nature and you get really good with pipe forks to where you can go in and do whatever you need to with them and you're not going to damage things. I got to where I could easily rub on actual pipe and structures without causing any damage to them once you learn this technique. So as always, especially for you new guys, I hope this helps you guys out and helps make your life a little bit easier on the job site. We'll catch you on the next Down and Dirty.